Imagine you're in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Okay.
It's the rainy season, right? And all of a sudden the water's rising,
Right.
flooding. A bit stressful, huh?
Definitely a stressful situation, yeah. But what if you could feel prepared instead? Like, what if you knew the right steps, you had the right tools, and you knew your community could respond?
That's exactly what we're talking about today.
Mhm.
We're diving into flood preparedness, specifically for the Sub-Saharan African rainy season. And to help us out, we've got the experts at RescueRide.
Us.
They're an organization that's all about equipping communities and first responders, giving them knowledge and resources to handle floods.
Yeah, they're doing great work, RescueRide. They're really key in building resilience against these floods. We'll definitely be talking more about their work in this deep dive.
Awesome. So we'll be covering everything. We'll talk about essential equipment, like the high-tech ambulances,
Oh, yeah.
the ones designed for flooded terrain.
Yeah.
We'll even talk about the simple stuff that's super important, like sandbags.
Yeah, you can't forget about those.
Okay, so first things first, risk assessment. Now, it sounds kind of technical, but I'm guessing it's really just about knowing the flood risks where you are.
You got it. It's super important to know your specific risk. I mean, we're talking about pinpointing the areas that are most likely to flood in your region.
Right.
And, you don't always need fancy technology to figure this out. Take the Tana River Basin in Kenya.
Okay.
Communities there. They've got a long history of watching flood patterns. They know, for example, that when there's tons of rain in the Ethiopian highlands, the risk of flooding downstream in Kenya, it goes way up. That kind of knowledge, it gets passed down through generations. It's super valuable for knowing the flood risks.
That's really interesting. So even without, fancy technology, communities can still have a really good understanding of their flood risks just by watching those patterns and using their local knowledge, right?
Exactly.
But what about those high-tech tools you were mentioning?
Oh, yeah.
What's their role in this?
Well, if you want a really detailed analysis, we've got geographic information systems, GIS. They use satellite imagery, data analysis, even historical flood data to make super precise maps. Like, imagine having a map that shows you exactly which spots in your community are going to flood.
Wow.
Almost like a crystal ball, right?
Yeah, that's incredible. That would be a game changer for communities, especially those trying to plan long-term, to really mitigate these floods. Okay, let's move on. What about equipment?
Okay.
This is where it gets really cool for me because it's like gearing up for an action movie.
Yeah.
What kind of gear are we talking about here?
I like that.
Yeah.
You're ready for action. Well, we're talking essentials, first of all.
Okay.
Sandbags.
Of course.
For barriers, right? Water pumps.
Yep.
For getting rid of all that extra water. And flood barriers to protect those important structures. These are like your frontline defenses when the water starts rising.
That makes sense. Now, I'm guessing there's got to be some more specialized equipment too, right? Especially for those emergencies during a flood. What about that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where RescueRide comes in, with their expertise.
Okay.
They've developed these incredible flood-ready ambulances. And mobile clinics, too. They can handle flooded terrain. They've got raised suspensions, all-terrain tires, waterproof compartments for medical supplies, the whole 9 yards. It's like a superhero ambulance.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Makes sense.
Yeah.
You need vehicles that can actually get to people, especially when those roads are flooded or impossible to drive on, right? And it's not even just about transporting patients. It's about having medical help right there in the middle of the disaster zone.
That's exactly right. And those mobile clinics, they're like little hospitals on wheels, equipped to provide care on site, even in really tough spots.
Right.
And this is super important in areas where healthcare access is already limited. Floods just make that even worse.
Yeah. Okay, so we've assessed the risks. We've got the equipment sorted. What's the next crucial step in this whole flood preparedness plan?
Communication. You got to be able to communicate. That's key. And it's often the first thing to break down during a flood. Power outages, cell towers get damaged, networks go down. It makes it super hard to coordinate rescue efforts and to share crucial information.
Yeah, that sounds like a nightmare. You're dealing with a flood and then suddenly you can't call for help. You can't check on your loved ones.
Exactly. That's why you really got to have a solid communication plan.
Absolutely. So what does a good communication plan look like for flood preparedness, especially in places where technology might be limited? What are some of the key elements?
Well, the most important thing is to have really clear rules.
Yeah.
Protocols for emergency alerts.
Okay.
Everyone in the community needs to know who to contact, how to get that information out there fast, even if it's just word of mouth or, through local networks.
Right.
And we can't just rely on cell phones, especially when networks are so unreliable. So radios, satellite phones, even using local broadcast stations or social media, they can all be really important ways to get information out.
So it sounds like it's all about having a plan B.
Yes.
Even a plan C, just in case one method doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not enough to just have these things. You got to test them regularly, not just when a flood hits. Make sure those radios work. Make sure your emergency contact lists are up to date. You don't want to wait for a crisis and realize your whole communication system's busted.
Yeah, that's great advice. Preparedness isn't just a one-time thing. It's about those regular checks, making sure everything's working. Okay, so we've got risk assessment, equipment, communication. What's next on our flood preparedness checklist?
Now we're moving from the tools to the people using them, training, and community engagement. They're super important. You can have all the right gear, all the communication systems in the world, but if you don't know how to use them, under pressure, that's a problem.
Right. So we're talking about giving people the knowledge and skill to respond the right way in a flood.
Exactly. So you got to have regular training drills, first aid training, water rescue techniques, and of course, how to use all that equipment we talked about. Sandbags, water pumps, even those specialized RescueRide ambulances.
Yeah. So it's not just reacting in the moment. It's about having that knowledge beforehand, like muscle memory, but for disaster preparedness.
I like that. Muscle memory for disasters.
Exactly.
It's about being ready for all kinds of scenarios, reducing that panic, making sure everyone knows what to do in a real flood.
Absolutely. Now, what about RescueRide? What role do they play in the training? Are they involved in teaching those essential skills to communities?
Oh, for sure. They actually offer customized training programs.
Wow.
Designed for each community's specific needs. So they're out there on the ground, working with first responders, community leaders, everyday people. They're equipping everyone with the skills they need to prepare for floods and respond effectively.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's about understanding each community's unique challenges and making sure the training fits.
You got it. And beyond just the technical stuff, RescueRide, they're big on community engagement. They know when communities understand the risks, the warning signs, the procedures.
Right.
It keeps people calmer.
Yeah.
And it helps them support each other during a flood.
So it's like they're building this whole culture of preparedness at the grassroots level.
Yes.
So it's not just about individuals having skills. It's about the whole community working together like a team.
That's it, exactly. It's about building community resilience, not just in terms of infrastructure and resources, but in terms of social support and taking action together.
That all makes sense. But what about that worst case scenario? What if, even with all this preparation, we have to evacuate? What do we need to have in place for that?
Well, you got to have a good evacuation and shelter plan.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Think about those designated evacuation routes. Clearly marked, well-maintained, leading to those safe assembly points and shelters.
So those safe havens, right?
Yeah.
For people who have to leave their homes. What kind of supplies should be there in those shelters?
The basics are crucial.
Okay.
Food, water, blankets,
right.
First aid kits, all that.
Yeah.
You got to have enough to give immediate relief and support. And we can't forget about vulnerable populations, right?
Of course.
The elderly, people with disabilities, anyone who might need help with transport or, have specific needs during an evacuation.
Right.
You got to make sure everyone's accounted for and that everyone's getting the support they need.
It's really great to hear about organizations like RescueRide working to build this kind of preparedness in communities.
Yeah, they're doing amazing work.
But let's shift gears for a second.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the practical steps, but what about the emotional side of things?
Oh, yeah.
The psychological impact of floods. We don't always talk about that when it comes to disaster preparedness.
Definitely. Floods can be really traumatic experiences.
Right.
Imagine losing your home, everything you own. All your belongings just gone.
It's devastating.
It's incredibly devastating. And the fear, the stress, the grief,
Yeah.
it can stick with people long after the floodwaters are gone.
It's like those ripples,
Yeah.
The impact goes way beyond just the physical damage.
Right.
It makes you realize that being prepared isn't just about physical safety. It's about emotional and mental well-being, too.
Absolutely. That's why taking care of these emotional and psychological needs is such a big part of any preparedness strategy.
So where do we start with that? How do we help people who are going through all that emotional fallout after a flood?
Well, first, you have to understand that everyone copes differently.
Yeah, that's true.
There's no magic formula for healing. Some people might need that psychological first aid right away,
Right.
while others might benefit from longer-term support, like counseling or support groups.
So we need a bunch of different resources and support systems to make sure we're meeting all those different needs.
Exactly.
Now, what about the role of the community in all of this? It seems like having that social support would be crucial for helping people cope and rebuild.
Oh, absolutely. The community can be so powerful in these situations.
Right.
When neighbors help neighbors, when friends and family rally around those who are hurting.
Yeah.
It creates a safety net, that sense of belonging that can really help people process their trauma and start to heal.
There's that saying, a burden shared is a burden halved. It really shows you that we're not meant to go through tough times alone.
That's so true.
We need that support, that sense of community to help us through those challenges.
I agree completely. And those acts of kindness, those moments of empathy,
Right.
they can go such a long way in building resilience, not just for individuals, but for the whole community.
And that resilience, it goes beyond just the immediate aftermath, right?
Yes. The psychological impact of a flood can last for months, even years.
That's so important to remember. Recovery isn't just a quick fix, it's a long journey.
It is.
It makes you think about how crucial those long-term mental health resources are. Just as important as those initial emergency response efforts.
Couldn't agree more. We have to make sure that people can get ongoing counseling, support groups, whatever they need to deal with what they've been through and to rebuild their lives.
Okay, so we've talked about practical preparedness, emotional resilience, the long road to recovery.
Yeah.
But what about the long game? What can we do to actually lessen the impact of floods in the future? Things like sustainable infrastructure, early warning systems, community-based strategies.
You're spot on. Being prepared for floods isn't just about reacting to a crisis. It's about thinking ahead, taking that proactive long-term approach. Investing in sustainable infrastructure, for instance, is huge. Things like better drainage systems, flood-resistant buildings.
Oh, yeah.
Infrastructure that's actually built to withstand rising water.
So building with that resilience in mind from the start.
Exactly. Not just trying to fix things after the fact.
Makes you wonder if there are any examples of communities that are doing this well, those sustainable solutions.
Oh, there are definitely some cool examples, like the Makoko Floating School in Lagos, Nigeria. It's incredible. It's built right on the water.
Wow.
Designed to move with the tides, so it's super resilient to flooding. It shows you how creative and adaptable communities can be when they're facing these challenges.
That's amazing. It's like they've taken this problem and turned it into an opportunity. Now, what about early warning systems?
Oh, yeah.
I imagine those are crucial. Giving people time to prepare or even evacuate before a flood hits.
They're absolutely vital, and they can range from really simple community-based networks, relying on local knowledge and observations,
Right.
to super high-tech sensor networks that track rainfall and river levels in real time,
Wow.
giving people those precious extra minutes or even hours to get ready.
It's like having eyes and ears everywhere,
Yeah.
but on a much bigger scale.
Yeah.
Using technology to make us more aware and to respond better.
Exactly. And there are some really exciting new developments in this area, too. Some communities are using cell phones to send out flood warnings,
Oh, wow.
even in places with spotty network coverage. Really smart way to use existing technology to reach people fast.
Yeah, that's great. Using technology as a tool for resilience, especially when it's tailored to the needs and resources of a specific community. But what about those community-based adaptation strategies you mentioned? They seem like they'd be super important in places where maybe access to technology or fancy infrastructure is limited.
Oh, absolutely. These strategies draw on things like traditional knowledge, indigenous practices,
Right.
local innovations, all to manage flood risks.
Makes sense.
Could be something as simple as planting flood-tolerant crops,
Okay.
or more complex stuff like building houses on stilts or setting up community-run early warning systems.
So it's about combining modern tech with the wisdom and experience of people who have lived with these challenges for a long time.
Exactly, empowering communities to be active participants in their own resilience, not just relying on help from outside.
Yeah, I can see how that sense of ownership would be incredibly powerful for communities, especially when facing these tough situations.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any examples that come to mind of communities successfully using these kinds of strategies?
Tons of examples. In Bangladesh, a lot of communities have actually gone back to using traditional flood management techniques, like building raised mounds of earth to protect homes and livestock during floods. Really shows the power of local knowledge and community-driven solutions.
It's amazing. It's about enabling communities to take charge,
Yeah.
to be part of the solution, not just waiting for someone else to fix things. We've talked about so much, the practical stuff, emotional resilience, those long-term mitigation strategies, and how important it is to have community-driven solutions. It's a lot to take in, but it feels like there's a common thread running through it all. What would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is that being prepared gives you power.
Right.
When you have the knowledge, the tools, and the support systems,
Right.
you can face any challenge with confidence, even something as scary as a flood.
It's about taking that feeling of being overwhelmed and turning it into a feeling of being in control, right?
Right.
Knowing what to do, who to turn to, how to handle a flood.
Exactly. It's about shifting from fear to action, from just reacting to being prepared.
Absolutely. And it's a journey we have to take together. Individuals, communities, organizations, governments, everyone.
I agree.
All working together to build a stronger future.
It's a powerful message of hope and collective action. And speaking of organizations making a difference, let's focus on a group that's doing really great work on the ground, RescueRide.
Yeah, RescueRide.
They're doing some really innovative stuff, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa.
That's right.
In the next segment, we'll dive deeper into their approach, their impact on communities, and the inspiring stories of the people they've helped.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking all about getting ready for floods and how communities can be resilient. But now let's focus on a group that's doing amazing work out there. RescueRide. We've mentioned them a few times already, but let's really dig into what makes them special.
Yeah, RescueRide really stands out because they create solutions that fit the specific problems of areas that flood a lot, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Right.
What's cool is how they use cutting-edge tech, but they also really understand the local needs.
Yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, which is super important in these places that are so diverse.
We've talked about their ambulances and mobile clinics a bit. What exactly makes those vehicles so effective in these flood situations?
Well, just imagine a regular ambulance trying to get to a community when water's rising and cutting them off.
Right.
It's going to struggle, right? RescueRide's vehicles, they're built to handle those obstacles. We're talking about raised suspensions, all-terrain tires. They even have waterproof compartments for the medical supplies. It's like they took a normal ambulance and gave it a serious off-road makeover.
It's like a superhero ambulance.
Yeah.
But it's not just about getting around, right? These are mobile medical units.
Exactly. They've got all the important medical equipment so they can provide care right there on the spot, even in those really tough spots. Imagine a village that's been hit by a flood, cut off from everything.
Yeah.
And then one of these mobile clinics shows up. It's a lifeline.
It's bringing that health care directly to the people who need it, even when the usual ways of getting around are totally messed up. And what I think is really awesome is that they're not just there for the immediate crisis.
Right.
Their mobile clinics help with the long-term recovery too, don't they?
That's right. They're a big part of that recovery process after a flood. They provide medical care, vaccinations, even health education to help communities get back on their feet. It's that ongoing support we were talking about. But mobile.
It's about addressing those immediate needs and also helping with those long-term goals.
Yeah.
But with RescueRide, it's not all about the technology, right?
Yeah.
They're really involved in getting the community engaged and empowered too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They work directly with the local communities, training first responders, raising awareness, and basically helping them build up the ability to prepare for and respond to these floods themselves. It's not some top-down approach. They're giving the power to the communities to be a part of the solution.
It's a perfect example of that participatory approach we were discussing before. By working with the community directly, they're making sure those solutions really fit the specific needs and that the local knowledge is valued.
Exactly. And you can see the results. Communities that partner with RescueRide say they feel more ready, more resilient, and more confident about facing future floods. It just shows you the power of working together and sharing knowledge.
You mentioned the RescueRide checklist earlier.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
It's a great resource. It's like this practical step-by-step guide for individuals and communities to figure out how prepared they are for floods and to see where they might need to improve. It takes all those complex ideas and breaks them down into manageable steps so people can actually do something about it.
It's like a roadmap to resilience.
Right.
Guiding people through the whole process of getting ready for floods. I really like how RescueRide doesn't just give information. They give actual tools like this checklist to help people put what they've learned into action.
Yeah, it really shows their whole approach. They're not just talking about preparedness. They're providing the things you need to actually make it happen. That's what's so inspiring about their work.
It's been a really interesting journey exploring all the different aspects of flood preparedness and seeing the amazing work that groups like RescueRide are doing. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one last thought.
Yeah.
Something to think about as they continue on their own paths to being prepared.
Okay, I'm listening. What are you thinking about?
We spent a lot of time talking about preparing for the physical and emotional impacts of these floods. But what about our connection with nature itself? How do we change our mindset? Going from one of fear and just reacting to one of respect and learning to live with these forces of nature.
That's a deep question. It's one that needs some serious thought. Maybe it starts with recognizing that floods are a natural part of our planet, a force that's been shaping the world for ages. We can't control nature, but we can learn to live with it better.
It's about changing from trying to dominate nature to adapting to it, using sustainable practices, designing our communities in a way that respects the way water naturally flows.
It's about finding that balance between what humans need and what our environment needs. We can't be well if our planet isn't well.
That's a great reminder that real resilience isn't just about stronger buildings.
Yeah.
It's also about having a deeper connection with nature and figuring out how to live in harmony with it.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that what we do affects everything else. When we make good choices, both as individuals and as a whole, we can create a more sustainable and resilient future for us and for future generations.
Thank you for being with us on this deep dive into flood preparedness. We hope you leave feeling empowered, informed, and inspired to take action. Remember, preparedness is a journey we take together. Stay safe, stay curious, and let's keep learning and growing.